A fourth day of conflict between Israel and Iran has seen both sides widen their retaliatory attacks, resulting in mounting casualties. The Israeli government says its military campaign, which began on Friday, is aimed at dismantling Iran's nuclear and ballistic missile programs. The Iranian regime insists it doesn't intend to develop nuclear weapons, but has the right to pursue nuclear energy and research. Not surprisingly, the crisis has become the dominant issue at the G7 Leaders Summit in Canada.
We have to find a way to de-escalate the situation, notwithstanding the concerns that we all have about the nuclear program. There's no doubt about that. Notwithstanding, we all accept Israel's right to self-defense, of course, but there must be de-escalation, and that will be the central focus of much of the discussion today.
They have to make a deal, and it's painful for both parties, but I'd say Iran is not winning this war, and they should talk, and they should talk immediately before it's too late.
We assessed the conflict with Glasgow University's Chair in Global Security, Professor Peter Jackson. 4 days into this conflict, and it seems to be escalating rather than de-escalating.
No, that's a really good point, Colin. I think that it's in neither party's interest at the moment to de-escalate, certainly not in Israel's interest, because Israel hasn't achieved any of their key objectives of degrading and destroying Iran's ability to create a nuclear weapon.
What would take the heat out of this conflict?
Well, I suppose if the Iranians agreed to come to the negotiating table, but I'm not sure that the Israelis are keen to have that at the moment. I think they want to do as much damage they can to Iran's ability to enrich uranium and move towards weaponizing and obtaining a nuclear capability.
And how much damage are they doing? Because we've seen the attacks on civilian institutions today, the hospitals and the TV station in Iran.
Well, the TV station's understandable, I suppose, because that's the main source of state propaganda. But the hospital's very, very unfortunate and probably a war crime. And so that I think is something that the Israelis will not be keen to talk about.
And we're in early days of this conflict so far, but how long could it last, do you think?
Well, I think the timeline I've heard is about 3 weeks. So another 18, 20 days from now is what I think the Israelis had banked on. They seem to have planned this virtually and agreed and decided on it the minute that Trump was elected. As soon as the election results were in the United States, I think, from what I hear, Netanyahu gave the go-ahead for this operation. So it's been on the cards since then.
So what do you think they had to wait until he was elected? Do you think they needed him as president to give them some kind of free rein to do this? Do you think?
Well, I think they tried to get the Biden administration to agree to this, and the Biden administration refused and said, no, under no circumstances do this. But two things happened which I think provided a more permissive environment for Israeli plans. The first was the election of Donald Trump, and the second was when the IAEA criticized Iran for violating the terms of its pledges not to weaponize enriched uranium.
So ultimately, if it lasts for a week, 3 weeks, whatever, how do you think it will play out?
Well, that's a tricky one. That's $1 million question, Colin. I think that once both sides have done quite a lot of damage and taken some lumps out of one another, they will eventually come to the table. The question then is, how much damage will Israel have managed to do? It's pretty clear that Israel can't destroy, the Fordo enrichment site, where the main business of Iranian nuclear experimentation has been happening, but also
I think just because it's so deep underground.
Yeah, it's at least half a mile underground from what we hear. It would be difficult, even I think, for American capabilities to penetrate that far. But in any case, what I do think the Israeli government hopes will happen will be the Americans will be drawn in. I mean, we see now the Nimitz aircraft carriers moving into the region. Even the United Kingdom has sent Typhoon aircraft to protect British interests in the region. So the potential is there for escalation. At the moment, I think it probably won't happen, but...
Do you think the UK or the US will get involved?
I think that, this is my guess, I have no inside knowledge on on what the calculations are. But I think both the British and the American military assets are there as a warning to Iran not to escalate further and draw some of the other Gulf state governments into the conflict.
So you think Iran will just keep their focus, their target, on Israel?
Well, I think that's part of the purpose.
And they are getting through some of the Iron Shield, aren't they?
Yeah, no, they're managing to get through just by sheer numbers, I think. And so Iran's trying to defend itself, but it's in a very difficult position.
And are there wider implications of this as well, in terms of things like oil price and the kind of global economy then?
Well, I think that depends how far Iran is willing to go. For example, if the Iranian regime decides to close the Gulf of Hormuz, that's where about a third of crude oil passes in terms of the world
Saudi
trade.
Arabia as well.
That will send up oil prices very significantly, I think.
Professor Peter Jackson, thanks for joining us in Scotland tonight.
Thank you very much.